Hey TaxBots, I am Abby with Legal Aid of Southeast and Central Ohio, and I am here with Kathy Hoover, an attorney from our tax team. Today, we are going to be talking about how to understand if you're being audited, so feel free to leave a comment or question, and we will go through and answer what we can. So, to get us started, Kathy, when a taxpayer gets a letter from the IRS, does that automatically mean they're being audited?
No, so the IRS sends all types of letters and notices. Letters are the main way the IRS communicates with people about their taxes. While letters from the IRS can be confusing or even scary, it's important to open the letter and read it carefully. You may miss out on important deadlines if you ignore the email. If you do receive an IRS or exam notice, the IRS is normally asking you to provide certain credits or deductions. Excuse me, that were claimed in your tax returns, like the earned income tax credit or the child tax credit. An audit can be a long process, and the IRS has to follow a lot of steps before they're allowed to charge a taxpayer more tax or reduce a refund. Those steps are put in place to protect the taxpayer and give them a fair chance to respond before the IRS acts. It is possible for the IRS to make changes to your return without going through the whole examination process. The IRS considers these changes to be pretty simple. However, it can change your refund or tax due by thousands of dollars. For example, of the sped up process is called the math error notice. While the taxpayer makes a mistake on a return, like adding numbers wrong or not submitting the right form, the IRS changes that return and then sends the taxpayer a letter that tells them about the mistake that has already been fixed. There are other errors that the IRS will treat as what they call math errors as well, including removing a credit if you don't include it on the right form, or to remove like a stimulus payment that you've claimed that the IRS thinks they've already paid out.
And so Kathy, when they get this notice, will it just be labeled math error notice?
No, so unfortunately, the IRS doesn't make it that clear. The notice may say something like changes to your 2024 1040, adjusted refund, or amount due, or something like that. They won't actually use the words math error notice. There will also be a notice number in the top right-hand corner that will say either CP11, CP12, CP13, or maybe CP16. You can visit irs.gov and search for these notice numbers to see examples.
And what happens if the taxpayer disagrees with their math error notice?
Yes, if you disagree with the math error notice, first you should read the entire notice carefully and try to understand what the IRS has changed on the return and why they made the change. These notices can be many, many pages long, and sometimes the important info can be on the second page or even later in the letter. And finally, make note of any response deadlines. Next, you should respond to the letter and explain why you think the changes made by the IRS to your return are wrong. You'll want to include copies of the documents that support your position. If possible, you should send the letter by certified mail within 60 days of that date of the IRS letter. That's 60 days of the date that's on the notice. Be sure to mail the response to the address that's on the letter. There can be very different addresses on different letters that look very similar, so make sure you're getting the right address. And keep a copy of not only what you mailed, but the proof of that mailing from the post office as well, so that you can prove that you sent that in the timely manner. When the IRS gets your letter, they should undo the changes they made and start following the longer exam process that we talked about earlier. This gives the taxpayer more rights to appeal decisions that the IRS is making about that return.
So you mentioned a 60-day deadline. How important is this 60-day deadline, and what happens if you miss it? Is it too late?
Yeah, so it's best to send that letter within the 60 days because you'll have more rights to challenge the IRS if you do so. But if you miss that 60-day mark, you should still respond as soon as you can and provide all the information and documents you have. Better late than never. After 60 days, the IRS does not have to undo their changes to the return, and you won't have the same protections from the IRS. And the IRS may start trying to collect that money if it thinks that you owe any from the changes that it made. You can still respond at this point, but you may also need to contact the collections department, the IRS, at the same time.
Okay. And can you give us another example of a notice that a taxpayer might get that would automatically change their return?
Sure. A taxpayer can get a notice that's called an automated underreporter notice. This happens if the income you listed on your tax return does not match the income that was reported to the IRS under your Social Security number. Each year in January, your employer is required to send you a Form W-2 that reports all of the money you earned the year before and the withholding that was done for your taxes that will be due. You may also get a 1099 or other tax forms from other people or businesses that paid you money. The IRS also receives this information. If the IRS computer sees income that was reported to them that isn't listed on your return, they send what's called a CP 2000 notice. That notice describes the income that the IRS thinks you should have included and tells you how much additional tax they think that you owe. The taxpayer then has 30 days to disagree with the IRS. That's 30 days, not 60 like the other one. So make sure you're keeping track of those deadlines. If the taxpayer doesn't respond, the IRS will follow up by issuing what's called a notice of deficiency. At that point, the taxpayer has 90 days to file a tax court with petition with the United States Tax Court to challenge that notice.
Okay, and this is kind of sounding like it's just an audit process. Is this any different from an audit, or is it just the same thing?
Yeah, so by law, the IRS can only audit or examine a return once, so taxpayers don't get bothered repeatedly, and they're supposed to fix any issues all at the same time. The process for that is for the automated under reporter and the math error notice aren't audits, so you can go through these processes more than once and then still end up having an audit.
Okay. So then are there any other IRS functions that act like an exam?
So kind of. So sometimes the IRS delays the processing of a return or the issuing of a refund because they want to verify a taxpayer's identity or the income that's claimed on that return. The IRS generally sends a notice requesting identity verification or proof of your income, but there could be a very long wait time between that filing of your return and receiving your notice when that happens.
And I don't think there's anything that people dislike more than a long wait, so is there anything a taxpayer can do to speed up that process?
I wish I could tell you there was, but not really. It's important to respond as quickly as possible to the notice and provide all of the required information that they ask for. However, these types of issues require human intervention, so the processes can take longer as a result of that. But if it's been 6 or 7 months since you filed your return and you haven't received a refund or any notices from the IRS, you want to make sure you call the IRS to see if they have a record of receiving that return, or if they did and somehow the notices they sent just didn't get to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kathy, for answering these questions, and thank you to everybody for listening. If you have more questions, please see the link in the comments or visit the Taxpayer Advocate website. The video recording of this session and others in our tax series are available on our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. So join us next time when we continue our series on tax issues. Thanks so much.
In our tax